Welcome into the first episode of the Weekly Burn. I'm Tyler Rakin here with Ian Nicholas and Dylan Pescator. Guys, first off, first few days, first week of the season. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I understand the record's only 1-2, but when you think about a Kelly Nicholson team, guys, you think of pitching. And outside of a tough fourth inning on the road on opening night against Bourne, you cannot ask for much more from the pitching. Not only have the starters been good from, even Callan Fang at home in the loss to Matt Watson, when we're filming this just last night in the first win of the season against Falmouth, and Evan Truitt on opening night against Bourne. The starters look good, but a lot of the bullpen options aren't draft eligible, like a couple of the names I just mentioned. They should stick around for the foreseeable future and maybe step into starting roles. I feel confident in a couple of those guys to take on bigger roles.
Ian, you're exactly right. And you talked about the pitching. The hitting is the same as it was last season that the Firebirds went all the way to the championship. It started out slow. Hey, these guys haven't played in a month, maybe even a month and a half for a lot of these guys, maybe even the Ivy League guys, like you mentioned with Fang and Matson. So they're going to have to get back into it. And it's, of course, the wood bat. It's a full transition. The hitting's going to get going, but the pitching being as good as it is, like you said, Ian, is a huge, huge positive.
Pitching is great. Bats might need to get a little bit more active, but before we get ahead of ourselves, we can go through this game by game. So understand this is being posted on Wednesday. We're recording it before Orleans plays Wareham. That will happen later tonight. But let's go back to Saturday, game one. It was a 9-4 loss on the road to the Bourne Braves. And it looks bad. The final score looks bad, but it was really just one bad inning that really changed this game.
Yeah, it's a loaded lineup that Bourne has. And they got theirs, right? They got 11 hits, but Orleans also had 10. And I understand, but I think at least two or three of those came in the top of the ninth inning because Orleans was on the road at Bourne, where, Firebirds, there's no spread in the Cape Cod Baseball League, but they made it look a little bit better than the final score would really show you with two runs in the top of the ninth. But I thought the bats looked good. I mean, Dylan harped on it a lot. Top of the order, did a good job. Mike Mancini had a hard hit double in that game. Lorenzo Miola looked solid. Landon Moran, who we'll touch on a little bit more, he's got multiple hits in all three games, and it started with two hits on opening night. But the first two runs of the year, J.P. Smith, hard hit double. Want to see a little bit more of that from J.P. We know he's got it in him, but we got a little bit of a taste of it on opening night.
We did, and the pitching held up just as the hitting tried to, especially later in the game. But the pitching kept the team in the game until that fourth inning. Great start by Evan Truitt, going 3 innings, walking just one, allowing just one run, and striking out one as well. Kept his team in the game. That's what he did all last summer for the Firebirds, and did it again for Orleans on opening night. That tough fourth inning that Ian mentioned, it started with Chase Hoover, and I talked with the coaching staff. They said of the 5 pitchers that Orleans used that night, he had the best stuff, but he just had trouble controlling it. And he hit a couple batters, walked a few as well, walked one, hit two. Overall, allowed 6 runs, 5 of them being earned. But a huge positive coming out of that game, especially on the pitching side, was Cody Bowker. 7 outs he got out of the bullpen, especially coming into a tough situation in the fourth with runners on. Struck out 6, got those 7 outs, allowing just 2 hits and 1 walk. So we're excited to see Cody again, whether it be tonight or maybe even Thursday back at home at Eldridge. And then Saul Soto, we got to see him for the first time in the 7th inning, along with Braden Quinn as well from UConn. So using all arms, testing them all out, seeing who works, seeing who can bring a huge spark to this bullpen that's been really good so far.
And also, just to add one more thing there, Cody Bowker, one of the guys that, I was kind of alluding to earlier, does his role change as the summer goes on? Because he was his starter at Georgetown in the spring, probably going to be a starter at Vanderbilt, where he transferred to next year. Already threw a lot of innings this year, but do they move him into a starting role in July? Because he's only a sophomore, and he should be with the Firebirds, through the end of the season if all things go well.
He could certainly end up getting some starts this year. One guy that seems to be settling into a role, Saul Soto, has been the setup man in 2 out of the 3 games so far. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to game 3. But we'll actually go to game 2 next, which was a pitching duel, a theme that is seemingly sticking around for a little bit through the first week or two of this season. The Firebirds fall to the Kettleers 2-1 at home. It was the home opener. And in this one, the theme just a little bit too little, too late with the one run coming in the bottom of the ninth.
Yeah, you know what? There was too many of, for Firebirds fans, strikeouts. It's going to be hard to win a game where you strike out 10 times, including multiple strikeouts from 4 different guys, and you only walk 4 times. So, Katuit was ready to play, maybe not offensively. They did just enough to get the win. Kettleers with 5 hits, Orleans with 4. If there are some offensive bright spots, I'd say the one that really stuck out to us was Roch Cholowsky. Got on base twice. Had a ribby in the 9th inning when you mentioned it, too little, too late. He was the lone, Firebird to put a run across the board with his hard hit single. But his defense was also really good, too. We ended up starting at short in the next game, which we'll talk about in a second, but played a lot of third base in that game, in the loss to Katuit, and in the spring with UCLA, because they had a veteran shortstop. It doesn't matter where you put him on the left side of the infield, Dylan. Roch is going to get it done.
Roch takes after Brandon Crawford. That's his guy that he looks up to, and he might even be better defensively than Brandon Crawford. I mean, how smooth is he on the left side of the infield? Doing the prospects, looking at what he could be in years ahead. Let's talk about the pitching in this game. Callan Fang was really good, just made 2 mistakes, and his changeup that was on and off during the game, the hitters, especially Devin Taylor and AJ Gracia, tuned into his fastball and put it over the wall. He went 3 innings, allowing 2, striking out 3. But the pitcher, in my mind, that really showed out in this game was Michael Fultz. He came into a situation in the 4th inning that he had 2 on and nobody out. That could smell for disaster. It was already 2-0 Katuit, and things were not looking bright for the Birds. Fultz came in, got 2 quick ground outs, and then a fly out to end the inning to get out of that jam. Went 1-2-3 in the 5th, and then was back in a 2nd and 3rd, or check that 1st and 2nd, with nobody out jam that he created, and he got out of it, getting a bunt that moved the runners over, and then 2 flyouts to end the 6th. So Fultz was really good in the game. Saw a couple more arms. Saw Itsuki Takamoto. He pitched a clean inning in the 7th. Brennan Cyber, and of course Sean Matson to finish that one off as well. So even though the Birds didn't get the bats going in the home opener, the pitching was there and kept them in the game all the way through.
The pitching was really solid, but you guys were talking fielding. You got to give some credit to the fielders as well. I talked to Fultz after the game. He made it through 3 scoreless innings, only picked up 2 strikeouts, and he did talk about how consistent the fielders have been for the Firebirds. Very few mistakes so far. You can think of maybe just one error. There was a missed throw on a dropped 3rd strike in yesterday's game, but other than that, like with Cholowsky, but pretty much everyone else, the fielding has been strong. And there's some players playing out of position right now. Some guys catching that haven't caught too much at college. We've got a first baseman playing in left field a little bit this year. Just some really weird situations that players have been put in, but they're being successful while they do that.
Yeah, welcome to summer ball, right? Especially with, not in a full roster just yet. Not everybody who's expected to be a Firebird is here just yet. Some guys coming in this week who we'll talk about maybe in just a little bit. But I think one player you alluded to there, Tyler, is somebody we've talked a lot about on the broadcast, and Eddie Yaman. Started 2 of his 3 games at catcher, but hasn't really caught over 2 years at Dayton. But the reason why he's behind the plate this summer is to prove to coaches that are trying to recruit him in the transfer portal, which he just entered a couple weeks ago, that he can't catch. He's confident in his abilities there. You mentioned he had a little bit of a flub in the win against Falmouth, but he has to put that behind him and be confident the rest of the way if he wants to generate significant interest from big-time schools.
And you talk about that defensive adjustment that a few guys have had to make. Throughout 3 games for the Firebirds, you've had 3 guys play left field that really don't play a lot of outfield. It started with Jack Gurovich against Bourne on opening night. Actually made a very nice catch in left field to start it off. The second game against Katuit, it was Hudson Shoup in left. He made a few nice plays. And then Landon Moran last night against Falmouth. He got to play the outfield as well for the first time in a long time. So it's all about getting bats in the lineup, and whether you play left, whether you play right in college, it doesn't matter to the Firebird staff because they want your bat in the lineup, and the fielding has really held up like we talked about.
Well, Dylan, there weren't too many bats active in the lineup yesterday, but it was still a 1-0 win for the Firebirds over the Commodores. The pitching was on point from start to finish. There was a run early in the second inning, and that's all Orleans needed to get the W.
It was. The pitching was locked down. And these are the type of games you have to win when the offense is going through a cold streak like this. At any level of baseball, you're going to have your hot streaks, you're going to have your cold streaks. When the bats are just trying to find their way, they're in a little bit of a rut. The pitching has to hold up, and they did so as well as you can. Matt Watson started it off, and it didn't look great in the first inning. He said he had to kind of adjust a few things. The game sped up on him. Bases loaded, 2 outs for Falmouth in the top of the first. Watson gets out of it, struck out the side in the first, added another strikeout in the second. Overall, went 4 2/3, striking out 5, allowing just 1 hit and 2 walks. The bullpen, we talked about it. We'll keep talking about it. It was great once again. It started with the young man, 18-year-old Miles Gastola came in, got 4 outs in the middle of this one. Brendan Walker came in, struck out 2 in the 7th, and then it was Soto to Matson. Just like in the first game, we had Saul as the setup man, Matson always the closer. Soto got a huge double play in that 8th inning after he walked the leadoff man, Mancini to Cholowsky to Gurevich to end out the 8th, and then Matson closed it out in the 9th. So the bullpen and the pitching overall was strong in the win against Falmouth.
Yeah, it was the first double play turned on the season. We talk a lot about how good this defense is, and Mancini, Cholowsky, Mike Mancini, that is, and then over at first, I believe it was Jack Gurevich, his more natural position. Those are all 3 players who, again, are underclassmen and should be here for the foreseeable future. So good to see that they're, working really well already through 3 games in the middle of the infield. Offensively, Birds cut down on the strikeout numbers last night from 10 in the previous game, like I mentioned, against Katuitt, to 4. But where they did kind of shoot themselves in the foot was base running. They got caught stealing twice, first Mancini, and then I believe Daniel Bucciero as well got caught on the base paths. And not to say they were bad decisions, because Bowen behind the plate for Falmouth has a cannon. I think he's a pretty high draft prospect. So, those are really, really good throws, but for a team that's struggling offensively, you got to wonder, do you have to take those risks? Colin Tuft, he took a couple risks late in the game. He never came around the score, but he, got on base and then stole second and third. So I don't know what you think about those, Dylan. The decision-making, stealing the bases, going for it last night. Overall, they went 2 for 4 with the offense kind of sputtering right now. What did you think of that?
Well, I thought that, like you said, Ian, when the offense is in a little bit of a rut, you have to get anything going. Walks, bunts, trying to find your way on base at any cost. And I don't blame Mancini. Mancini took him a perfect throw from Bowen to get him out. It was just Bowen made the better play. Bucciero got caught as well after he hit the RBI double in the second. It's all about trying to find runs right now early in the season here in the Cape Cod Baseball League. So I had no problem with it, and especially Tuft. When you look at it, stealing third with 2 outs is never something you really want to do, but he had a jump that was outstanding. There was no chance even the perfect throw from Bowen was going to get him. He was off on first move, and he was there on third before the ball could have even got to the glove of the third baseman. So I like the aggressiveness. I like the stolen bases from Orleans, and hopefully they get to keep it up tonight against Wareham.
So tonight is that Wareham game, but taking a breather and looking back at these past 3 games, there's been a lot of pitching depth, pretty much around 10 or so pitchers that have come in and done well, and they've all done well. But is there anyone that sticks out above the rest to you guys as someone that will be super helpful to the Firebirds throughout the rest of the season?
I'll give you 2. I'll give you one that will sadly probably not be with the Firebirds for the entire season, and another one that I really liked that will be with the Firebirds for the entire season, hopefully. I really liked Matt Watson last night. He's a guy, a veteran, a returner to the Firebirds that can kind of show the way for a lot of guys. He came in and really didn't get spooked in that first inning where a lot of people could have. Bases loaded, walked a couple guys, allowed that double down the right field line, and then finished out that inning, and it was cruise control. Second, third, fourth, and a couple outs in the 5th as well. That was big for Matty. He got in. Sadly, he'll probably be gone in mid-July for the MLB draft. But a kid that's going to be around for a long time this season, hopefully, is Miles Gastola. And I think he showed a lot of confidence, and it really showed to the Orleans Firebirds culture that an 18-year-old like him just finished his freshman year at Gonzaga can come in and have all the confidence in the world. And he did. Got a few outs on his own. It was a bunt right in front of him and then a chopper right back to him the next inning. He got 4 key outs in the middle of the game. I'm excited to see how he progresses over a summer ball season facing off with some top D1 talent.
Yeah, I'll go to a starter. I know we already talked about him, and it wasn't a loss, but another player who I think we should continue to talk about because he's not draft eligible and he should be here all summer is Callan Fang. I know we already talked to him before the season on Eldridge Extra. You could check out that interview, right here on our YouTube channel. I understand he's sitting, 3 innings pitched, 6 ERA, but that doesn't really tell the full story. Like we talked about, he only gave up 2 solo shots. They were both leadoff homers, and one of them was to one of the best players in all of college baseball in Indiana's Devin Taylor, and AJ Gracia from Duke is also just finished up his freshman season. A really great player too. So struck out 3, 2 of them were backwards Ks. He had the second most backwards Ks in the Ivy League this year. Didn't even know you could really track that, but good on the Ivy League for finding that. His stuff is nasty. He's got a velocity on the mid-90s with that fastball and a 12-6 curveball that fools a lot of guys and catches them looking for strike 3. He's a great starter, in the spring, and he was a great starter last summer. Actually, he was a reliever last summer with the Vermont Lake Monsters in the Futures League, but he's going to be a starter this year in Orleans, and I think whenever he hits the bump again, I think he's going to have a good bounce-back effort.
3 certainly good selections so far. I mentioned his name earlier. I just want to point him out again. Saul Soto, if he can be a really solid setup man in a similar role that Watson served last year, I think that could certainly serve the Firebirds well. But moving over to hitting, that's where Orleans has had a few more issues. Landon Moran has been consistent. 2 hits in the first 2 games, 1 hit yesterday. JP Smith certainly brings a lot of power. But who else could step up over the next few days, maybe getting adjusted to the wooden bats and starting to come alive for the Firebirds?
Yeah, I'll start it off. I really like Jimmy Keenan. He had a few really good swings in the home opener against Katuitt. Had a hard hit base knock down the left field line that he got thrown out at second. He just hit the ball too hard. It caught to Brennan Compton and left too quick. And they got a really nice swing off in the 9th as well. That if that ball is hit to probably any other part of Eldridge Park, it's way gone, and the Birds win their home opener on a walk-off home run by Keenan. He has major power numbers, just finished off 2 years at St. John's, all Big East first team, and the Big East tournament most outstanding player as well, transferring to Wake Forest in the fall. So I'm excited to see how Jimmy plays. He'll start tonight against Wareham as him and Eddie Yaman go back and forth doing the catching for the Birds, and I think he brings a lot of pop to the order. He bats cleanup for the Birds tonight against the Gatemen.
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of go with a boring answer, and I'll say Colin Tough, to be honest. I know he won't be here for super long, but, you mentioned Dylan talking about Matt Watson earlier as a culture setter guy, somebody who's going to teach the young guys, what to do on the Cape, how to conduct yourself, how to have a little bit of fun while they're out here too. Colin Tough is not a super serious dude. He's very easygoing. He's a good guy to have in the clubhouse and just out there on the field. He just plays very confident. I think, he had a really great spring with Tulane where he exploded as an all-conference player for a team that made a regional. And now he's put himself on the map as somebody who could definitely get drafted and has all the tools, whether it be as a catcher or as an outfielder, where he's played primarily for Orleans over the last 2 summers, to get it done. So he had multiple hits on opening night, still multiple bases against Falmouth, like we already talked about last night. He is continuing to bat 9th, once again in the order for Kelly Nicholson tonight. Shout out Coach K. We always know who's playing, 6 to 12 hours before the game. But I like where Colin Tough's at right now, and however long Orleans has him, I think he'll be a staple of the lineup.
There's obviously a lot of statistics and analysis of these players in the Cape League, and Colin Tough has actually been identified as someone with quite a bit of bat speed, so that could certainly be helpful, especially with the adjustment to the wood bats. One other name I'll throw out there, and again, this should surprise no one, is Roch Cholowsky out of UCLA. He batted over 300 for the Bruins this past season, was a freshman All-American, and so he certainly should have quite the showing this season. And before yesterday's game, actually, Ian had a chance to talk to him, so we'll take a listen to that right now.
All right, here with UCLA infielder Roch Cholowsky, 2 games into his Cape League career, and One season into his college career, Roch, how's the transition been from the Bruins in the spring out here to the East Coast where you haven't been in a little while?
It's been a lot of fun. The weather's been good out here. Good baseball the last couple of days, and it was good to get out here and meet the guys and just get rolling.
Right, so this is your first summer ball experience, right?
Yeah, first time playing summer ball.
What is that transition like? You go from the Bruins, which was your dream school, with all the guys that you get to know over a full year. And do you know any of the guys on this team really headed into the last few days?
I'd met a few prior, played against some. But, I mean, it's kind of nice coming into a new team and just kind of getting to know new guys and their backgrounds and what they're about.
And one of the biggest adjustments outside of playing with a bunch of new dudes is learning how to use that wood bat after using the aluminum bat in the spring. As a hitter, what is that transition like?
It's not really much different. I mean, just kind of the feeling and, kind of staying inside the ball more because, I mean, obviously you can go through more bats without doing that. There's a lot more forgiveness on the metal bats. But, tradition hasn't been too bad.
Yeah, that barrel gets a little bit smaller with the wooden bat. Also speaking about a bit of an adjustment, UCLA in the spring, you played a lot of third. You're going to play short tonight. That's usually where you line up. How's that been like, making that transition here and there on the left side of the infield?
Hasn't been too rough. I mean, coming up, I was always a shortstop, and then I got the chance to play third this year. It was good to learn this year, and definitely something that I'm going to use later on. So, it feels good to be back at short, though.
I was reading an article about you. It says you kind of play short like you played quarterback back in high school, always throwing off platform on the move. Defensively, obviously you were really good last night at third, but what do you think are your biggest strengths there?
Definitely my feet. My footwork is something that I take a lot of pride in when taking ground balls. And, I feel like that sets me up to make all the plays that I need to.
And for offensively for this team, need to make a few more hits earlier on in the game. What do you think? I mean, in the ninth inning, the last two nights, you guys have found a way to come back and stay alive. But what do you think is the biggest thing for the whole team to kind of do to make sure you get a few runs early, a little run support for the pitchers?
I think just having the same approach that we have in the ninth. We're going up there not trying to make the last out. We're putting good swings on balls. It's just I think we need to have that approach the whole game, and it'll translate over.
Last thing I want to ask you, I know it's not Father's Day anymore, but I know your dad got drafted pretty high in the early 90s, really good player, Cal back in the day, and now works in MLB as a scout. You reached out to him yesterday, and how's he following your season from afar? Are we going to get the parents up here at some point?
Yeah, they're going to head out in a couple weeks, stay over in Chatham. He loves this place, and, he's going to be happy to be back.
So is it going to be weird being in Orleans instead of being in Chatham, or is he going to have to catch a Chatham game?
No, he'll come to all the Orleans games for sure.
All right, sounds good. Roch, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course.
It's always great to hear from our Firebirds players. Make sure to tune in to Scorching Start before every game for Ian, myself, or Dylan to talk to one of the players. And as well, you can tune in to the Weekly Burn. We'll play one of those interviews every single week. But now looking ahead to the next week, tonight obviously is the Wareham game, which you'll know the result of as we're listening to it. Hopefully that's a win for the Birds. After that, it's a day off, which you'll be listening to this during, and then a short homestand versus Chatham on Thursday, and then another home game versus Harwich on Friday before a road trip to Hyannis on Sunday, and then before that off day next Monday, it's Brewster, the close town rival, next Sunday.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most interested to see, because to be honest, it's kind of hard on a day-to-day basis to really identify who the stars are of every single team. You haven't seen any of these four teams before, but you also haven't seen two of the managers. Two new managers in the Cape League this season, and Orleans is going to see both of them for the first time over these next four games. Thursday's game against Chatham at Eldridge, Jeremy Sheetinger, Georgia Gwinnett, really good JUCO, and he's the head coach there, and he's taken over. It was a weird year for Chatham last season, to put it lightly. And they've gotten off to a 2-1 start this season. And you also see a former Firebird early on last season, Team USA guy who left Orleans, Austin Overton, is now batting leadoff for the Chatham A's. So a new guy in Sheetinger, but also Austin Overton making his return to Eldridge, wearing Chatham blue is going to be a little weird. And then when you go at Hyannis, where Orleans opened up last season, again, we don't really know the whole situation there, but Hyannis had a great year last season under Eric Beatty, who's now the pitching coach at Chatham, and then they decided to move on from him, and they have a new manager there, Mitch Karacker. So you get two new managers, and it will be interesting because, the talent's always going to be high level, Dylan, but each manager kind of has their certain philosophies, certain styles, whether it's pitching changes, whether it's offensive philosophy that they try to instill on these guys. And Chatham and Hyannis are two games that I have circled over the next half a week.
And I'm right with you with those two games. Hyannis 3-0. They're only allowed 5 runs in those three games. They've been walking at a crazy rate. Their offense is outstanding. So a great start for the Harbor Hawks over there in Barnstable and in the Barnstable County. The game that I have circled is Brewster. You play so many games against your own division. Of course, the Birds went 6-0 against the Whitecaps last summer. They have to do something of the sort against your own opponents. You're only judged against the East Division in terms of the playoffs. You have to be in that top 4. So the Birds get their first look at the Caps, at the Mariners, and of course the A's as well. The Birds had a little trouble with the A's last year. Harwich gave them trouble early in the summer before they got him in the playoffs. The Birds did. But Brewster, let's see if they bounce back from last summer or the Birds can continue their dominance over the crosstown rival.
It's a great collection of 3 home games across a span of 4 days. A great weekend to come out to Eldridge Park, but you can also tune in to CapeLeagueTV.com for all 3 of those games and every single game throughout the year. 6:30 for home games. Tune in 15 minutes early. On the road, depends on the opponent, but next Saturday is 6 o'clock against Hyannis. That about does it for us today on the Weekly Burn. Make sure to follow us on YouTube to see this podcast every single week, as well as some highlights from our broadcast, which we'll be posting after every single win this season. That's it for us, but make sure to tune in next week for myself, Tyler Aiken, Dylan Pescator, and Ian Nicholas. Go Birds.